Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of Witchy Business. Today we have Belinda Matwali, who is joining us to chat about all things spiritual nutrition, meditation, astrology, human design. It's gonna be a great chat, I'm sure. Hi Belinda.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to getting to talk about all those fun things with you guys.
Yeah, thanks for joining. Okay, so our new little ritual on the pod is to start with how everyone is properly feeling. Just taking that moment where you just go, yeah, I'm good. And then taking that exhale, just really actually feel into it. So how are you? Big silence.
Who wants to start? I thought you were like generally asking the
I didn't know if that was rhetorical for the audience, like let's have a moment. Because to be honest, we all need more space to sometimes feel, don't we? And so it's great to have that space. But it's such an important question to check in. And as you said, really somatically feel in the body, because we're always like, yeah, I'm good, I'm busy, whatever, like robotic answers. And yeah, I've been feeling like a lot of quite busy energy. I think I'll say I've really been conscious that I need to like just slow down, take a few deep breaths, ground. I'm in Ibiza at the moment, so like not in raining England for once. So I've been like, walking barefoot on the beach and going for little swims and being in the sun, and yeah, just kind of being a bit more gentle with myself, because I definitely have an undercurrent of, I'll just call it fizzy energy. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I really relate with that. I have been feeling the same and just feeling the call to slow down, like really, really slow down, and just it feels like it's there's like this kind of, it's like hustly energy that's like making me want to like move really fast, and then I know that that's like my sign to just be like, no, pause, slow.
Thank you. I'm not quite sure how I'm feeling. I've had a pretty hectic 4 days. I was away for my cousin's hen do, and it was pretty go, go, go. And actually, I think I'm just feeling peaceful, like, okay, just where I should be. And yeah, just enjoying that, because it hasn't been the case for a while. So yeah.
Thank you.
So, Belinda, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about you and what you do, please?
Yeah, sure. So thanks again for having me. It's great to be on your podcast, and I've had a very zigzag journey in life, which probably quite a few people can relate to, because I think we don't all just have this life where we just decide to do one thing and we do it forever. So I've had quite a few different careers and changes, but then since my Saturn return, we'll use that as an anchoring point, I've been very interested in training in meditation and spiritual psychology and astrology, and a lot of things along these lines. So it's been like about 10 plus years. And what that has looked like is, going to India 20 times to sit with my masters in meditation, living in different parts of the world and learning from different teachers, and then kind of bringing a lot of those skills to where I live now in London, working online with people one-to-one, also working in the retreat space, and creating courses and journeys that are an accumulation of all those things, the meditation, a little bit of nutrition, because I've studied that as well, the spiritual psychology, and the trauma-informed work that I'm studying with Dr. Gabor Mate. So it's a lot of things. When I pull them all together, I called it trauma-informed spirituality. And for me personally, that's really important, because a big part of my spiritual journey was not trauma-informed. It was very, even though on the outset it appeared to be very helpful, it was like, okay, you are just going to be like a quantumist and not let things phase you. The past is the past, and you are the master of your energy, which is true, but without giving space for any of the trauma-informed work. And because of some of the ways that I later on kind of found out that that wasn't so healthy for me, I'm now really passionate about sharing spirituality in this way with other people through the one-to-ones, courses and trainings and things that I do now. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that, because more and more I find that what's shared about spirituality, I call it like the love and light. That's what it's all about, like positivity, and it's quite, I find it quite damaging actually, because it's not trauma informed.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, the new age misconceptions where people have cherry picked certain spiritual truths and beliefs, but because they're cherry picked, they're taken out of context. Because even when you look to very traditional tantra, that was very considered one of the most early forms of spirituality. If you look at the 112 meditation techniques in the Vinaya Bhaiva Tantra, which, sorry, I always mess up the pronunciation, many of them are actually thematic. It's about going in and being present with what is until completion, and then finding the divine on the other end. So there's definitely, none of this stuff is new per se, but because it's been covered and layered and we've changed as a culture, everything always continuously needs a refresh. And that's also what spirituality means to me, like updating for where we are now, but keeping, those universal truths that never ever change. They're always going to be there. But how does that affect a human being living in 2023?
Especially in a city like London as well, or like any kind of busy city where your job might be quite hectic and busy again. But then it's like that, it's like, how do you integrate your journey with that kind of lifestyle?
Yeah, definitely, because we're, people are very open. We're not living in the same time as Buddha, and even a lot of those techniques were very much, people had time to reflect, and people were more in their heart space. Whereas when I'm working with a lot of people now, it's actually quite common for people to be very disassociated from their body and not even truly realize it until they come in to do some of this work. So it might be like, drop into your heart space and feel this. Not everyone can do that, but it's assumed that everyone can. And I think that also creates a lot of issues for people. People either go through the mind of like, oh, I'm thinking about my heart space as a way to kind of adapt, or thinking about feelings coming up in the body. I'm thinking about anger, I'm thinking about sadness, but not actually able to have that visceral experience in the body. So I think that's one thing that's possibly more common now, not that I was living at Buddha's time, but just because of the very fast pace of life that we have been grown up in. And even like when we were children, it was more common for both parents to be working, and the kids can sit in front of the TV or sort themselves out. Divorce rates were higher. The children of today, there's mobile phones, so even if the parent's with them, the parent might not be giving them their full attention. And when we look at all of those things from a trauma-informed approach, as a small being, we need that attention, like unconditional attention, and we really feel when we're not receiving it. And there are many other little examples like this that people don't realize, all these like little T traumas that kind of build up, and in the end sometimes we do have this coping mechanism of like, either I'm not worthy of receiving, or I'm just going to shut down those emotions because it's too painful for me to even contemplate that my caregiver doesn't 100% love me right now. And a lot of this is pre-verbal as well, before we can speak. So yeah, there's definitely a lot to unpack. And so if anyone's listening and sometimes you're like, oh yeah, I'm not actually really feeling, like, you're definitely not alone. And it shows that your body was doing an amazing job to protect you about something at the time. And there are ways to kind of unwind that. That's the thing about trauma. In the teachings I've had, we define trauma not as the events, but how we respond to the event. And if it means we had to go through something alone, or it might have been even just like, you know, a parent said, oh, what are you talking about? You don't know anything. And that creates a coping mechanism of like, it's not safe for me to speak and I don't know anything. I've had clients like this. They're so well educated. They know so much. And they're so scared about speaking up because they're holding on to this coping mechanism. So that's what we call the trauma. The trauma is keeping them smaller. It's not keeping, they're not in their full authenticity. A little bit of them shut down in that moment when the parent said, what are you talking about? You don't know anything. And so that's the work we can then do, like reclaim that part that shut down and give it some love and compassion so that it can flourish again. So just to give a little bit of context of sometimes what we mean about the word trauma, because it is used a lot and people might have different definitions. And so when, we're using it here, it's just like, you know, what are the parts of us that got shut down and how can we claim them back?
How would you describe, or what are some examples of what that looks like now in an adult life? So like if those are kind of subconscious beliefs or trauma that someone's experienced at a young age, how then does that kind of manifest later on in life?
Yeah, very much. Like the one example was just like this client I was working with, and she is in her like late 40s. She's done a lot of training. She's had 2 successful careers. She's now working more in like the energy work realm. And yeah, she's done all this studying. She knows so much. And when she was receiving invitations to share a workshop in a corporate environment or a class, she just went into a panic, kind of like sweating, like, you know, I don't know enough. And definitely one of those people that's a constant course taker, and I love learning as well. But when you're always doing the courses and you never feel confident enough to share that, if it's just that one-way street, you know, that's what was happening for her. And internally, she had this voice saying, like, you don't know enough. Who are you to do this? And even though the logical mind is like, look, on paper, you've done all the trainings, you have amazing testimonials, there is so much evidence, the power of that subconscious is still stronger. So there's a part of her that's still at age, I think it was 7 for her, because we went back to that 7, that's kind of stuck. And it was about going back, also acknowledging that that part was really clever at the time. It's not that this is a bad thing, because I think people can also get into that loop. Oh, I hate that part of me that just doesn't feel ready. And, you know, we get really frustrated at ourselves. And there is that spiritual saying, what you resist persists. So when there are parts of us that we're feeling frustrated by, or we're not enjoying, the more we push it away, it just actually becomes worse sometimes. So this was very much about going in with that level of compassion, speaking to that part of her, finding out what she needed, finding out what the belief was at the time and how we could turn that around into a new belief. Because, you know, my perception is that this healing work this client will always have to do to some extent. It's just that we get more practiced over time and more identified with our authentic self rather than this particular part. And when we can understand what the part was doing and speak to it with compassion and love, it starts to have less control over us in the driving seat. And I think, I'm not saying I don't believe in quantum healing at all, but I think the new age spirituality that we were talking about earlier has overemphasized that, oh, we can just quantum heal stuff and that is never going to happen for you again. And, you know, I see people that have spiritual epiphanies, and then a few weeks or a few months later, they're so frustrated because they're kind of back where they started. And it's like, well, that's okay. That's normal. If you've had a part of you that's been subconsciously running your life for 40 years, it's not just going to go away in a week. But the more that you, and when we talk to those parts, it's kind of like the self, or the higher self, or the I, you know, always grapple with the right word that feels good. We're identifying with that more than that smaller part. So that's just an example. And I think everyone can relate. Logically, we all know what we should be doing in our business to succeed. And it's like, yes, I should be, you know, creating these opportunities and networking. And, you know, sometimes a big opportunity comes and we just freak out. And we're like, we have to have that little talk with ourselves. And a lot of that is trauma-informed stuff from when we were younger at school.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Can you explain quantum healing for anyone listening who's not heard about that before?
Yes, not that I'm an expert in it, so I'll do my best, but I guess people do believe that like, what's quantum first? It's the unified field. It's that everything is existing at once, and that we can change timelines, and that through a mind over matter approach, we might feel like I'm just going to completely heal myself of something, or heal myself of the past. So, you know, I'm not a professional in this area, and I know there are people that do work in this area and they get results. But I just think if we blanket that over all types of healing, it's not helpful, because then people feel like I'm doing something wrong, it didn't work, whether they're working with a therapist or a trauma-informed person. It's like, oh, I've still got this issue. You know, it's not like you've got a magic wand and you're going to put it away. But, you know, equally, you see people like Dr. Joe Dispenza and other people like this, and people go on his meditation retreats and they get above their analytical mind to a higher state in meditation. And in that space, basically, they are rewriting some of their beliefs about, like, my body's not healthy, I'm sick, blah, these kinds of things. And people do then have miraculous kind of healings because they reset their body. So that is what I would kind of term as a quantum healing, and it's possible. But yeah, when we're talking about this kind of day-to-day work with working with different parts of us, it's what we call the doing the work. It's an ongoing basis, and I just think that's healthy for people to know. And every time we do that work, we're strengthening our authenticity, we're strengthening the connection with self. So it's not like we're having to do all this work for nothing. It has a lot of rewards.
Yeah. So it's like someone who would be interested in quantum healing is, it's kind of like the quick fix, or like, you know, that's what you might think that you get out of it, but then it's like more in the mind.
Yeah. And even with that, I think, you know, again, because it's not my main field of work, I think people can get a lot of insights, they can have aha moments, and then that's enough to kind of spur them on. Because even people going to Dr. Joe Dispenza's retreat, if they don't truly believe that their body is capable of healing, nothing's going to happen. But because they believe that, okay, my body can be healthy, I can move through this health issue that I'm going through, they have the heightened experience at Dr. Joe's retreat of going into very, very deep meditation. And basically that's where we rewire our brain, either in the superconscious or the subconscious, because we're outside of the analytical mind. And even after they leave his retreat, they still have to do maintenance, because if they go back to their old belief, the energy is going to reorganize to align with that old belief.
Yeah. No, it's interesting hearing that, and just like the comparison of, I guess, like from what you do as well, and then that kind of approach. But yeah, it's it's almost like it's like raising the awareness, isn't it, in some ways, but then you need that longevity and the tools and all of that for continued growth.
It's always continued work. I mean, the core of all of the work that we're all doing is really about consciousness awareness of our true self. And you know, we need to be doing practices every day to maintain that. So even my masters in India that have had many years of enlightenment, they're like, we do all of the groundwork every day. We do the meditations, the walking meditations. We do all the practicing that we're telling you to do. It's not like you have the little epiphany and then think you're enlightened. And, you know, we do see that a lot. I lived in Bali for a long time, and you'd see people go to like one ayahuasca ceremony, and then they just, you know, had this God experience and just thought that they were the best thing since sliced bread. And it's like, wow, you've got a lot of work to do, because you've actually built a very powerful spiritual ego, and you know, you've not actually integrated that into day-to-day life. And you know, that's what I call spiritual nutrition. It's nourishing the invisible aspects to make the visible really strong and powerful, because energy does create matter, and that's why things like meditation are so important. And then our beliefs, because the energy is just going to organize itself to fit with that belief or fit with what we're doing. A lot of people don't know that when they see pictures of a physical person with the aura glow around them, the physical body doesn't create the aura glow. It's the other way. The aura creates the physical body. And so a lot of people that then work in energy healing is about finding where there are breakages or dark spots in the aura, and then kind of fixing those, so to speak, then to create more health. So I'm really passionate about people learning how to use some of their inner pharmacy of like, when we meditate, we're taking in divine nourishment that reorganizes all of the cells in our body to create a divine inner health. And when we learn how to work with our energy, we start to feel more energetic. It's not about needing more energy. We often hear this phrase, like, I need more energy. I'm so tired. How can I get more energy? And through the laws of the universe, it's more, how can I be more resourceful with my energy? How can I learn how to use the energy in my body so that it's not leaking everywhere, and that I feel that I've got more of my energy? Because when we have our energy concentrated within us, we feel more powerful, we feel more magnetic. And so a lot of my business and brand has then been about recognizing this invisible, because our universe is 99.999999% space, and 0.000, there's 13 zeros, 1% matter. So I mean, when you think about that, and science has proved this now, so it's not a woo-woo thing. It's just crazy that if we are just focusing on the material things all the time, it's just silly. And so even with this trauma-informed work, that's why we're going into like, how does my body feel, and into thoughts and beliefs, because these are the things that are then driving forward our material existence.
Yeah. Emily and I, it's like we're attending a TED Talk. We're both like,
yeah.
Gonna
have to re-listen and take some notes.
Yeah, I find it really fascinating. I'd love for you to share with us maybe a little bit more of what your spiritual nutrition practice is like every day. Please.
Sure. I definitely changed my practice. So when I first learned with my spiritual mentor and I was living in Bali, it was like set routine every day, because that was a traditional way of doing things. But also the daylight hours are exactly the same every day, because you're so close to the topic. So it's always like 6 a.m. sun is rising. Oh, nice. I'm going to wake up with the sunrise. And 6 o'clock sunset. And so because I move around the world a lot, especially when I came to the UK, it did not feel good to do the same practice every day. And so typically now I coordinate, not so strictly, but by season. So when there are the equinoxes and the solstices, I normally kind of check in and be like, where am I at in my life right now? What am I navigating? What's going to feel super nourishing to me? And what I always teach in all of my courses and with my clients is to have a minimum viable practice, which is the thing that you can do even if you're getting up for a 4 a.m. flight to go to the airport and you're traveling all day, or you would normally do a practice, but your kids didn't sleep last night or they were sick and you've got to wash their sheets and you're like, oh, that was my time to do my morning practice. So minimum viable practice is just something that helps us to feel really connected in with ourselves. It could be as simple as taking 3 really conscious breaths into the heart space, if that's what makes you feel connected. It could be that you'd be like, I'm always going to write a page in my journal no matter what. It could be a particular pranayama that makes you feel good, like an alternate nostril breathing, like whatever it is. So just I have that, and it changes. Normally for me, it is just doing this 3 conscious breaths. And when we say we're just going to do 3, it's really easy for our mind to come on board of like, okay, let's just do nothing else, just these 3. And just to slow down. At the moment, I'm actually going back to one of my favorite practices, which is shaking. I do cathartic shaking and then I sit for 10 minutes. And I find that really good. And I'm doing that at the moment because we're in eclipse season. We spoke on the beginning of the call that there is a lot of kind of fizzy energy. The sun is conjunct Uranus today, which is like, there's more of that happening. I'm also personally having a lot of Chiron transits of planets passing my personal Chiron. So for when I do cathartic shaking, it's helping me somatically move through all of the stuff that this astrology is bringing up for me to look at. So I do cathartic shaking for 10 minutes and then I sit for 10 minutes and then I'm doing some journaling afterwards. So I'm doing that. And then, depending on where I'm at, I'll either do some like online Pilates or a walk. In the afternoons, I generally like to do a yoga nidra practice. And so yoga nidra is a laying down meditation. It's a very ancient practice. You go really deep with it. It does consist of a body scan that brings your body into a state of coherence rather than being all scattered and all over the place. What I adore about this practice is it works on so many different levels of our subtle body. So we do the body scan to align in, and then we work with our energy body. We work with our emotional body through pairs of opposite emotions. So with that, I normally practice something that I might have feel uncomfortable feeling, which might sound strange, but when we're in that relaxed state, we're not producing stress hormones. And it's almost like I'm helping my body to relearn that it's okay to feel that emotion, which you can talk more about afterwards if you want. And then there's a part where we go deeper into meditation, and we also work with personal affirmations. So I work with my own personal limiting beliefs. I've created a personal mantra, and I just find this practice so important that I do it every day, especially in winter when I'm feeling sleepy in the afternoons, or summertime. Often I do get up really early in the UK because the sun's risen and I'm quite ready for a siesta around about 3. So I do like a half-hour yoga nidra. And these I create for my clients. I do bespoke ones depending on what's coming up for them. What are the emotions they're having difficulty navigating? What are their limiting beliefs? And when you personalize it like that, it's such a healing tool. So they're the things. I've got like a minimum viable practice for the morning, and then I do something for my like afternoon nap, which is so much more powerful than a nap.
Yeah. And you have a yoga nidra practice that you've recorded on Insight Timer that I love doing. That's really
Thank
lovely.
you. Yeah, I think I've got a few on there.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna be creating a lot more for my community as well, because I just think it's so powerful. Sometimes people are like, oh, what's yoga nidra? It's got the word yoga in it. I don't want to do yoga. But it really encompasses so many powerful things in a session that can be 20 to 30 minutes of getting into a state of coherence, somatic healing, subconscious reprogramming, connecting with higher self.
It's like a really nourishing nap. Yeah, I love it.
Well, I know what I'm going to be doing after this recording.
Yeah, so if like, yeah, I think it's really important for people to have a minimum viable practice for the morning, because I know a lot of people, they're like, yeah, meditation makes me feel good, and you know, we start a practice and then typically it lasts for a little while, maybe 3 months, and then we kind of like do the fall off the wagon thing, and something happens where our routine is changed, and sometimes we just can't get back into that rhythm that we were before, and then it tends to be all or nothing for a lot of people. So that's why I recommend having that minimum viable practice, because it makes things feel really realistic and achievable. And that little bit of connecting in every day is like constantly putting money in your bank account and keeping that connection alive, versus when you've had a 3-month drought where you haven't meditated, and then sometimes you try and sit and you're just like, oh, I feel a bit rusty, I haven't done this for a while.
And I love the idea of, for us here, that we have seasons, like taking a moment when the seasons change to reassess what your needs are, what your capability is, because I guess like in summer we tend to do more things and have maybe less time for ourselves than we do in winter. And so realistically recreating your own spiritual nutrition kind of routine based on that, I find that I
also have a look at like what's going on for me personally, and sometimes I do use astrology, other times it's just intuitive, but typically we have seasons of our life where sometimes we're dealing with maybe more emotional stuff, or we might have other seasons where we're feeling like so connected spiritually, and it's like, well, yeah, go with that, like, you know, really deepen your practice now. So it's also tuning into that, like, you know, what do I really need right now? What would be super nourishing to myself? And not being afraid to deviate a little bit. I think we do need some structure of like, I am going to spend either this amount of time or some kind of structure that anchors us in, but also tuning into like, what kind of season you're in. Maybe going through a relationship breakup, how can your practice support you in that? Maybe you're starting your business or upscaling in your business, and you know, it's really stretching you. How can your practice support you in that? And I think that's really important, because when we really feel like our practice is helping our life for our human mind, it really, really helps with us getting stuck in. And I really recommend this for work as well, because sometimes people are like, oh, I'm so busy working on my business, and you know, I want to do all these practices, but how am I going to find time? Sometimes we need to reverse engineer that and be like, well, how is this supporting you in your business? Are you feeling more creative and more productive? Do you have self-limiting beliefs about offering your services, about selling? There's some traumas about you did a course in the past and no one bought it, and you need to move through that experience and get your confidence back. Like, all of those things your spiritual practice can help with. And I think when we start to see it from that point of view, it's so important we give value to what we're doing. The more we value it, the more that we get back. And if we just have it like, oh, that's my spiritual practice in the morning, and it, you know, it's like, well, what is that? You're doing some breathing, so what? Like, need to really connect it back into your big why.
Yeah, I love that. Are there any, in terms of astrology, you know, you mentioned earlier about eclipse season and how your practice is supporting you through that. Is there anything else that you can speak to that's like big, and that, you know, like anything that is like a watch out that you can then like up your practice in to support you through it, or just anything that comes to mind?
March was when all the big astrology for 2023 basically happened, and eclipse season's pretty big, so everyone can just relax, don't worry.
We're good.
There's nothing bigger coming than what we've just been through. We had the sun conjunct Chiron, we had the eclipses, which happen every 6 months on the nodal axis, and then Sun Uranus today. So things are feeling very unstable, and especially because we just had eclipses on the Taurus Scorpio axis. Like, the eclipse a few days before us recording this was a lunar south node eclipse in Scorpio, and it was the last one on that axis. So next time we have an eclipse, it won't be in Scorpio anymore. But Scorpio was like depth, intensity, death, rebirth. It's like, it hasn't been easy. And because it's a South Node eclipse as well, really dredging stuff up. Like, what haven't you worked on? Okay, let's bring that up. Especially because, as I said, it's the last in that particular kind of like pairing before the nodal axis moves on. So I think at the moment, people just need to process what's been happening, because that's a lot of astrology. And then we also had Pluto go retrograde. Pluto was also very much about the death, birth, transformation. And when it makes a shift, sometimes it can intensify that energy. So, yeah, it's really about processing, because what I find with astrology is everyone's always talking about what's coming next, which is great because it's the weather forecast. I love that. But we often don't see people talking about the reflection of like, we just went through a really big time. What came up for you? Have you had time to process it? Or has life been so busy that you have felt you just need to compartmentalize it, you know, back under the rug and try to move on in life as best you can? And sometimes it's just about giving ourselves space to acknowledge what's come up, because especially with that Scorpio axis, it could be a lot of uncomfortable feelings and things that we really would rather push to one side. And sometimes it's just about having that radical honesty with ourselves, because a lot of what astrology does, because it's a reflection of all of our inner archetypes, is it will keep activating things until we fully process them. So sometimes we think, oh my God, it's just easier to push that away and move on with what I'm doing now. But that's just going to fester and ferment. And the next time there is a big activation in that part of your chart, it's just going to feel like you crumble, or it could feel like a lot worse. So part of the advice is definitely just to reflect, digest what just went down in the last 3 weeks. It's a great time to keep reflecting, because we're still in Mercury retrograde, or I think even after this podcaster's life will be in the shadow period. And, you know, Mercury retrograde does get spoken about a lot, but it's really a time about awareness. Mercury is zigzagging back over one part of your chart. And so during the Mercury retrograde, it's when it's going backwards, it's helping to reveal things that maybe you didn't see before. That's why sometimes we're like, oh, you know, mistakes pop up, things that we might not have done correctly before, or we have increased awareness. Why did I say yes to that thing? I don't want to do it now because I'm seeing that person for who they are, or I'm getting extra information. And when it does go forward again, those next 3 weeks, it's going back over that same ground. So that's the time to go back over and kind of be like, oh, let's like fix up that thing that I didn't notice before, or have that conversation that I need to have, or do that emotional healing that has been coming up and I've been pushing to one side. So that's really important astrology, because sometimes the new age version of Mercury retrograde is like, oh my God, your life's going to be so hectic, and you're going to miss your flight and terrible things will happen to you. And it's never about astrology happening to you. It's always how have we been operating, and not coming from that victimhood, because a lot of the times, I mean, not always, but sometimes it's like, oh, I actually made a mistake leading up to Mercury retrograde. You know, I signed that contract and I didn't read the fine print. And I wish I hadn't done that. And, you know, so much of our healing journey, like the trauma-informed work, the meditation, everything else, it's really about taking self-responsibility. And that's very empowering. So that would be a way to use some of the astrology that's happening now. But that, you know, even the eclipses, they've just happened, but the effect of them lasts for 6 months. It's like someone banging a big gong, and there's that initial impact, and then there's the reverberation that's kind of going out. Yeah, so definitely reflection. And then we do have a few planets changing signs, but nothing like we did in March. March was a really big time. I mean, one of the things that happened in March was Saturn going into Pisces, and people have a lot of different takes on that, but I really feel that it's an opportunity for us to get very grounded in our spirituality And I actually wrote a bit of a blog and post on this, that I felt anything that was new age or superficial in any way, or not grounded practical astrology, is going to go out the window. It's not going to be tolerated. Saturn is very much about us doing the work, doing the 10,000 hours. And we have this transit for, I think it's like 2.5 or 3 years. So this is the time to really go in and be doing all the work we've been talking about, doing the minimum viable practice every day, not just thinking about meditation or I've read a spiritual book, so I've got it. Because that's a big thing that can happen. Our minds are so clever. We can absorb so much information. We can read all of these posts on Instagram about trauma-informed psychology and other dimensions, and but we need to integrate it into our physical body. And that's what Saturn and Pisces is asking us to do, which sometimes can feel hard because Saturn's a taskmaster. But if we do the work, we're going to reap the rewards. So that's another little kind of astrology tidbit. Yeah.
Thank you. That's so helpful.
Love that.
Yeah.
We can't have a chat without talking about music. Because like you posted a couple of reels on this, but a lot of meditation teachers, or how we visualize or think about people who are into spirituality, it's very much like taking a moment, being all zen in front of the ocean and stuff, and then you go in and bringing electronic music into that, which I absolutely like. This is one of the things we bonded over pretty quickly when we first met, and I would love for you to speak to that.
Sure. This is another new age spiritual thing of, the pretty white woman sitting on the beach, as you said, in some pose and smiling. And even with that, I remember one of my first spiritual teachers said, if someone's smiling like that, they're not really in deep, deep meditation, because you kind of actually have a bit of a, frown, because all of your muscles are just so relaxed in your face. So I hardly ever post pictures of myself meditating because of that. But anyway, away from that stereotype, we've got, and what annoys me, people call it traditional meditation. Oh, it's just sitting there like the yoga girl on the magazine. I'm like, no. A lot of traditional texts, especially back to the tantric texts, because they're, a huge inspiration for me. Tantra was made for householders to connect to the divine, doing regular household things, dancing in celebration, being upset and crying, and like really going to the depths of that pain, going all the way through it and finding the divine in food and in all aspects of life. So it's very, very multifaceted. And I also just want to say, if people confuse that with neo-tantra is, again, a modern thing that people have focused on sexual practices. And that also, I don't think there might have been one practice in the traditional tantra about, when you're in love with someone and embracing them, that you feel the divine. So traditional tantra is like a whole other ball game, but it's very much about embracing all aspects of life, and that there are so many portals to the divine through all these different aspects of life. And this is important because meditation is not just sitting in the sitting still position and going into samadhi. It's very important that we practice that, because we do need to quieten everything down. But we're not meant to compartmentalize that and then just go out and live life. Meditation is a whole lifestyle. And so for me, that lifestyle does consist from doing the discipline, the blissipin practices in the morning, and, going to the spiritual gym so that my mind is not fluttering around and all of my self-doubts are running riot in my head. It's doing that practice. But it's also about being very sensitive and perceptive to life. It's like, who is experiencing this? It's my being inside me. I have eyes and ears, but when I die, the eyes and ears, then they're just body parts. They're not really experiencing. So what's behind all that? And you can take this, as Anna said, like when I go clubbing, I love doing meditation style practices of using my awareness, feeling my body really alive, noticing where is the sound coming into my body, where does the sound stop when it enters my body, how does my body feel. And you know, this type of spirituality, it's not what you're doing, it's how you do it. Someone can be sitting in meditation on the beach and truly going very deep into samadhi. Another person can be doing it for Instagram and trying to look beautiful. Nothing's happening. It's empty spirituality, superficial spirituality. You can be at a party, someone can be there taking a lot of drugs and alcohol and going into unconsciousness, or you can be there completely sober, doing the practices like I do, and people often ask me like what I'm on, and just making it a spiritual experience. So again, I think it's a new age thing of like spiritual, we've put it in a box. And again, to the Saturn and Pisces things, you know, people can be doing all these things on Instagram. I'm holding a circle. Even when I was in Brazil, I went to a spiritual celebration that the natives celebrate, but half the people there were from this cool Instagram spiritual set who just dressed up, and they didn't care about the rituals. They just wanted their pictures for Instagram, you know. So it's not what we're doing, but how we do it. So music then for me, I mean, it's very spiritual, and you look at traditions all throughout the ages, people always use music to get into trance, drumming circles. It's been there forever. And so when I'm offering meditation and I partner it with electronic music, and people are like, oh, it's not traditional meditation, I'm like, actually, it kind of really is. The techniques that I use are very ancient, and the power of music to change us to altered states of consciousness is so ancient. It's just we have new language to talk about it now. So people are like, oh, I've invented something new. But, you know, even all of the things in the personal development world, even personality testing, because that's just basically astrology, isn't it, with a new name? Like, how do we define different energies in people? Things like 7 habits of highly successful people. Well, that's the 8-fold path of Lord Buddha, just rewritten. Yoga Nidra, Huberman Lab calls non-deep sleep relaxation, fancy word for the same thing. And so it's the same, like music changing us into altered states of consciousness. They're just new words to describe things that have been around. But I love that, and I incorporate those principles in my classes. Yeah. No, a bit of a rant.
I love it.
No, I loved it. Yeah. Yeah.
I could rant all day about those who go to quote unquote spiritual retreats and practices just to get good Instagram pics. Yeah, so
it's the thing, and I think the Saturn in Pisces, I think people are becoming more discerning now as well, like when people are buying into stuff, because I think at one point it was all like how things looked, and now people, I think, are more discerning about, well, you know, what's the energy of this person, what's the transmission. It's not even about what they're saying, because people can just read stuff in a book and regurgitate it, but what is the feeling, like, have they had that lived experience?
Yes. And how much are they actually respecting the culture that it's coming from?
Yes, acknowledgement doesn't happen. Even at the end of all my classes, I always thank the lineage and the teachers that have come before me. And there's, in that area, there's not a lot of respect. There's not a lot of acknowledging happening. And, you know, I see that even with people on Instagram, and they're sharing things. And of course, they've had their own insights and reflected on it. But the information that generally the main source is like someone else's. And I think to never ever acknowledge any teachers is really arrogant, and it's not a good practice. And I think energetically it's not a clean practice either. So, you know, on my website, or when I'm doing trainings, I'm like, this is where I studied and this is who I learned from. And it's about honoring and respecting.
I really appreciate that you do that. You can tell that your work, there's like so much integrity behind everything that you do, and you're always creating. You're always creating like super interesting and different courses. What are you creating / working on now? What's your...
Yeah, I've got a few projects, and it's really interesting being able to blend all the different parts of my work, because sometimes people are like, oh, you do lots of different things. I'm a Gemini rising, and for anyone that knows astrology and in human design, I've got an open G center. So I'm never satisfied just doing one. It's not like gonna ever niche down. But my current offerings, one that I'm doing at the moment is the Chiron journey. And so that's where we're using trauma-informed spirituality to look at our deepest wounds through the lens of astrology. And I just wanted to do that to create a different, more playful kind of approach, and a very personalized approach at looking at some of our wounding, because I think like self-limiting beliefs, it gets bandied around a lot, and it's been really nice to look at things from a different level, like looking through the astrology and then using the trauma-informed approach to help with that. So that's been great. I'm also finally, after many years of requesting, starting a spiritual nutrition collective, which is kind of like membership. I've had many people train with me over the years. Like, I think more than 200 people have done my level 1 meditation course, and then they're just like wanting next steps. And yeah, so I'm putting that together, and that is going to be through the lens of spiritual nutrition. So each month, looking at the month of the astrology, I'll be sharing practices which are going to be really nourishing to our subtle bodies, what we can expect coming up, and tailoring practices in that way. So there'll be a different theme every month. Sometimes we'll do a challenge. A challenge that I did a while back that was really popular was the Inner Connection Challenge, which was all about mobile phone free mornings and really developing our inner connection to ourself, our inner Wi-Fi, rather than always going for the information on the phone and it decreasing our creativity. So they're the kinds of challenges that we'll do in the membership space. There'll be weekly live classes at different times so that they can suit different lifestyles. And then a monthly call where we do go through the astrology and themes and just connect and have a bit of community, because I'm really, really craving that too. And then access to a ton of yoga nidras, meditations that I've created like over the last 5 years, which will be all organized by like category of like how you want to feel. So yeah, really, really exciting just to bring a very affordable offering together for community, and just to help us keep motivated in meditation. Because as I said earlier, people do often start for like 3 months, or you get excited, you do a course, and then everything falls away. And I just think when you've got that regular contact with someone and you're learning new things about meditation, because it's an endless journey, yeah, I think it's going to be super, super fun.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Sounds really fun. We'll make sure to link everything in the show notes.
Thank you.
Yeah, like nice and easy for everybody to access.
Yes, and even if people are listening later, there'll be on that, there's a 7-day free trial so that you can come into the world of spiritual nutrition and like feel it out. And if it feels like home to you, then you can stay on.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much for this chat. It was, so nourishing.
Thank you. I feel like I've done a lot of talking.
I could listen to you for hours longer.
That is the quad right in my human design. When someone asks a question, the information just keeps coming.
Yeah, and we are here to listen.
Yeah.
Really great. It's so good to see you, to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been a pleasure.